First theme is also to underscore that collaboration between the Pork Board, NPPC, and the American Association of Swine Veterinarians. PED has taught us a lot of lessons, and one of the outcomes of PED, one of the very positive outcomes of PED, is solidifying that relationship and working together toward an outcome, toward a positive outcome. And yeah, there's three legs of the stool, and this is very important, and your associations are working very hard to get things done on your behalf. The other thing about a theme, I think, and Dan did a great job of it, and Mark followed up with it, and Bob gave me the title of working on our preparedness. Preparedness is really three issues here. One is looking over the hill to try to predict what's coming. The second is to make sure that you have the capacity to detect, to surveil, and to respond. And then the third is having a response plan and having something that is a reasonable response plan in proportion to the disease outcome. So looking back at PED and with the idea that if we don't learn from history, we will be condemned to repeat it. Some of the lessons, and these are just a few of the lessons that we learned. We uncovered a lot of soft areas in the industry when PED showed up, and we're working very hard to correct those. But just a few of the lessons. Pathway of introduction is difficult, and I put difficult, and then I had to put at best behind that because I almost put impossible. It's not necessarily impossible, but it certainly is difficult. And the corollary of that, with all respect to Dick Hesse and putting that finger in the dike, the corollary of that is you got to hope for the best and be prepared for the worst. Be prepared for the next one because it's going to come. And I think Dan had that on a slide that it's not if, it's when. We've got to be prepared for the next one because it's going to come. One of the things that we certainly learned from PED is this state-federal industry response coordination. And Liz is going to talk more about that, but that's certainly a very important lesson from PED. And goes along with that response coordination is that we as an industry can't expect USDA to do our business for us, not alone. We need them as partners, but the industry has to step up, and producers, practitioners, all of us step up and be responsible for managing production diseases. Separate PED from ASF, from CSF, from FMD, because PED was a production disease. We've got other production disease. I pointed out PRRS when it came, circovirus when it came. Production diseases, the industry needs to be responsible for those diseases which USDA cannot act in a regulatory fashion, but we need them as partners. Some of my lessons from PED. So talking about the pathway of introduction is difficult at best. There's also the separation of pathways of introduction. We get mixed up sometimes with talking about pathways of introduction into the country and also pathways of introduction onto the farm. They very well may be the same, they very well may be different. And that's part of the issues that we've got to sort out with pathways of introduction type of investigation. And I think investigation is probably the best term that we need to use going on in the future instead of analysis or review. So the introduction into the country is really most dependent upon whether we're going to approach this as a CSI investigation or as a cold case investigation. The ability for us to get notified, for us as the industry, to get notified of an emerging disease, to find it, to understand that it's there, and then to go and investigate the introduction of that emerging disease as quickly as possible under the index case is absolutely critical. With the cooperation of USDA, we have a cooperative agreement that helps fund rapid response teams in PED. We did this, and we're using this as a model for the next type of production disease as well. Those rapid response teams include an epidemiologist, usually from USDA as we've gone on with this, an epidemiologist, an outside consulting veterinarian, so we get different eyes on the situation, and the practicing veterinarian with the farm. Those teams have gone on to 6 or 8 different epidemiologically distinct incidences of PED to try to investigate that entry onto the farm, and that applies to entry into the country as well. USDA is working on a pathways analysis, and as I said, I think in the future what we'd like to do is have a pathways investigation more than just an analysis. Certainly that's a formal process, and it looks at all of the variety of inputs, extremely important, and a good academic exercise to help us try to identify the risks and the factors that lead to introduction into the country. Another mention of a USDA effort is the Swine enteric corona disease international meeting that's going to happen in another week or so in Chicago. There are 21 countries that are going to be represented at this meeting. The chief veterinary officers are there, appointees, academics, researchers are getting together to talk about PED, enteric corona disease, and talk about the experiences within their country on the first day. But then really the second day is the meat of the conference for us, and that is to try to gain some information from the countries affected about what they think their risk factors were and the pathways analysis for the entry of that virus into their countries. When you look at those countries, you start down with Chile and you work your way up through Peru and Colombia, Mexico, the U.S., Canada, across the Pacific to Taiwan, to Japan, China, and South Korea. Those are all Pacific Rim countries. And there's a lot of interest in trying to figure out what the relationship is among those countries that led this virus to get introduced into the Pacific Rim. So that's something that hopefully will be an outcome of this meeting in Chicago. We've worked long and hard, the 3 organizations, we've worked long and hard about this question of introduction onto the farm. Transportation, biosecurity, of course, all of the information that we've got on the pork.org website that have put together recommendations for transportation, for traffic on and off the farm, for biosecurity practices and biosecurity procedures. Sometimes, and the Leman conference says we're going to act on science. Sometimes we didn't have the science to put those recommendations together, and we will reserve the right to learn and to do better. But we put the best recommendations that we could based on the information we had, putting the best minds together that we could get to give us the most applicable and effective recommendations of biosecurity that we could do. The other thing that we did last summer was bring together the feed industry, the AFIA, NGFA, the FDA, national renderers, and the feed industry in an effort to understand better this question of feed pathways and possibility of the implication of feed as being a vector. And one of the pre-conference workshops here was excellent at going through all of the issues with feed and trying to understand or get a better understanding of that risk. And an outcome of that meeting were the bottom 2 statements here that were crafted very carefully. Transmission includes environmental, transportation, feed